Yeah.
Well, what are we going to do about Christmas?
I don't know. I mean, my parents want them to come to their house.
My parents want us to go to their house.
Can we just not do either one?
No, we can't do neither. We have to spend Christmas with our families. We have to make a decision.
Well, what are we gonna do?
I don't know.
I'm done with kicking, screaming, pulling your hair to win fights.
I'm done with running and leaving, trying to prove that I'm right. It ain't right. Let's not go there. Let's find fair. We're waving our flags in the air like we don't care. Let's not go there. Let's just fight fair.
What's going on, Revolution Church? How's everyone doing this week at Rev Church? If you're joining us online, we are so incredibly glad that you are joining us this weekend. Hey, we haven't announced this for a couple of weeks, and our social media traffic and our ability to reach people over the last few weeks has dropped off significantly because we have not encouraged you guys to please get online. Go to Facebook, share the sermon, tag somebody underneath. Make sure you share every single thing. Go to our YouTube page. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Go subscribe, share it on your timeline, and encourage people to go like our YouTube page. It really helps us. It's the main way we evangelize. Before people come to church, they always check us out online almost every single time. Most of you guys that are with us right now, you checked us out online before you came to church. If you're watching right now online, you may be going, well, let's check this church out and see before we go if we're down with it or not. So please make sure you're supporting us on social media. You guys have done a great job this year. We just want to remind you guys to please like, share everything, Rev Students, Rev Kids, and Revolution Church. Well, we're in week number 3 of a series called Love Song, where we are going verse by verse through the book of the Bible, which is one of really the most scandalous books of the Bible. Majority of people, even if you've been in church for 30 or 40 years, you've never heard a verse by verse series on the Song of Solomon, which is where we are, especially on a Sunday morning. You haven't heard it. So far, we have seen this relationship between Solomon and who is now his wife, the Shulamite, really evolve and progress. Week number 1, first couple of chapters, we saw when they were engaged and they were courting, how they had passion for each other. They were looking forward to getting married, but they were honoring God. They spoke well of each other. He was verbally affirming to her. We found out some of their love languages and different things like that. Last week, we saw the wedding day and the wedding night. We saw what it was like on their wedding day, the procession of Solomon coming to get his bride. We saw the wedding night when they actually consummated the marriage. Very interesting sermon. I would encourage you, if you have not watched either of these, whether you're single, whether you're dating, whether you're engaged, whether you're married, maybe you've been divorced. There's so many different kinds of people at Revolution Church. We've got widows and widowers. We've got people that are 60 years old and looking to date someone and looking to get married. There's all kinds of different people. So I would encourage you to go watch those first 2 sermons if you have not had a chance yet. Well, today we get to what I believe is the most applicationally easy for every single one of us. Today is hermeneutically speaking, it is the most, I don't know, it'll connect with every single one of us in here. Even if you're in here and you are never going to have a relationship, you're never going to be married, today you are going to get some good content out of it, because today we are going to be talking about the big fight that this couple ends up having. My wife and I refer to big fights as fellowship that the neighbors can hear, because as pastors, you guys know, we're supposed to be perfect. We're never supposed to fight, but that's not true. We just have fellowship that the neighbors can hear. So we're getting ready to see a bad night in the bedroom. We just got done reading about the consummation of the marriage. It was so sweet. It was so tender. They connected. It was so beautiful. And we're getting ready to kick off the next chapter as we see them get into it. Here we are. We're going to start out with a young woman speaking. This is the Shulamite. This is the wife that is speaking. And let's follow along. Now, this is written in Hebrew poetry, but I'm just telling you, this week it is so, like, this plays out in every single one of our relationships. If you're married in here, like, it totally plays out. So she says this starting out in verse 2. I slept, but my heart was awake when I heard my lover knocking and calling. So right out the gate, just picture this, get this picture in your head of what is taking place here. She's home alone, and he is not there. She is by herself, and Solomon is coming home late. But something's off, because when Solomon comes home, he can't get into the bedroom where she is. She has locked the door because he's knocking and calling. He doesn't just come in. Solomon says this. Listen to what he says. Open to me, my treasure, my darling, my dove, my perfect one. Now, we have explained all 4 of those terms that Solomon calls her in this verse of Scripture. In the previous chapters, he has melted her romantically by calling her these 4 different things. If you want to know what those represent, you'll have to go back and listen to the last couple of weeks. But Solomon is repeating the rhetoric that he has said when they were engaged and on the night that they got married. And essentially what Solomon is saying is, I'm here, and I really would love to be romantic with you right now. In other words, to put it shrewdly, I'd really like to get some. Now, the request has been made by Solomon. Something's fishy because she's locked him out of the bedroom. Let's see what happens and how this plays out. She comes back at him after he makes this request, and she says, my head is drenched with dew, my hair with the dampness of night. Okay, translated in our language, she says, I just washed my hair. Now let's see where this is going. I just took a shower and washed my hair. Verse 3, but I responded, I have taken off my robe. Should I get dressed again? Now you start to kind of think, oh, she's taken off her robe, but then she comes back with, should I get dressed again? This is what she's saying. I washed my hair. I've already got my pajamas on. Then she says, I have washed my feet. Should I get them soiled? Okay, I've already taken a shower. I've got my PJs on. I'm ready for bed. I don't want to get dirty again. This is the equivalent to her saying, I have a headache. This will not happen. Now, here's a side note. This doesn't really apply to the whole fighting thing, but it will help with the fighting thing. Men, you need to understand that you need to keep dating and learning your spouse after the wedding. Notice that when they're married, the talk and all the job that Solomon gave while they were engaged and on their wedding day does not cut it. In fact, I like the way Bob Thurnbull puts it in his book, What Your Wife Really Wants. He says, for intimacy, women, the majority of the time, need time, talk, tenderness, then touch. So guys, don't get lazy in here. In the middle of a culture where we swipe right, where we have quick hookups, where it's very much like a wham bam, thank you ma'am culture, we need to take the biblical approach and take the time that we need to with our wives to make sure we are giving those 4 qualities, that time, that talk, that tenderness, before there is ever touch. So that's a side note, but here's the first major cause of fighting that I'm going to give you that we see in this first little section of Scripture. Now, these are going to be in no particular order, But the first one I'm going to give you, major cause of fighting that we see played out here, is selfishness. Everybody say selfishness with me. 1, 2, 3. Selfishness. Even if you're online, you need to participate in this. Selfishness, basically what I mean by that is following your emotions. Or in other words, doing what you want to do and not thinking about the consequences of the other person. I believe that selfishness, particularly inside the context of marriage, is really nothing more than idolatry, where the idol is really, there's three of them: me, myself, and I. We could rephrase selfishness as self-worship. Side note, this is why we always tell you guys to serve at the church. If you're single in here, if you're a teenager in here, I'm always on you about serving in the church, because serving people and washing feet is some of the best preparation you can have for marriage, because it works that selfishness out of you. But notice that the Shulamite is upset because he's home late. Most likely, he did not call her or send a messenger to let her know that he was going to be home late. She probably feels like, here he goes again, choosing work over me. Clearly, in this passage of Scripture, one of her other love languages is quality time. And as a result of him denying her of that, she chooses to punish him. She is denying him what he seeks. She looks at him, and not only does she lock him out of the bedroom, bad sign, probably happened to most married couples in here, right? Locked you out of the bathroom or something, just you ain't getting in here. She lets him know, you are not going to be romantic with me tonight. Solomon has to knock on the door of, remember in chapter 1, the house that he built for her in his own home. He's locked out of the bedroom. And we see this selfishness. Solomon most likely is walking in, and I'm speculating, but I just know men, and I know how this has played out in my life, and almost every single man that I've counseled, he's probably completely clueless. In this moment, he's probably thinking to himself, what's her problem? You know, I've been out earning a living for us. I'm working hard. Why is she getting upset? It's not like I was at a strip club or hanging out with my buddies or anything like that. And the way you're getting ready to see Solomon respond in the next several verses is through selfishness. Because Solomon, in the middle of their fight, in just a moment, you're going to see this, and this is a huge point we're going to hone in on. He walks out in the middle of the fight, and not only that, he gives her the silent treatment. Basically, what we see is, we see this fight start out with both parties acting like babies and being selfish. Well, let's see what happens from here on out. In verse number 4, it says, my lover tried to unlatch the door, and my heart thrilled within me. I jumped up to open the door for my love, and my hands dripped with perfume. My fingers dripped with lovely myrrh as I pulled back the bolt. I opened to my lover, but he was gone. Translation, here's what's going on. She's over it. She's moved past it. But Solomon isn't. She has pushed him to the point where he has essentially got to the point of no return in his mind, where now he is very upset. Typically, this doesn't always apply, but typically what I've seen inside of marriages, and I know this is true for me, that men tend to take and take and take and take and take, and then all of a sudden, it could even be something very small and very little that just sets us over the edge, and we've had enough in our minds, and it's over, and we will hang on to it for longer than we should. This is what's happening here. They're on opposite pages. She's over it. She's ready to make up. Solomon is not over it. She continues and says this, because he wasn't there. She says, my heart sank. I searched for him, but I could not find him anywhere. Just a side note for the men in here, one of the worst things that you could ever do when you get into a fight with your wife, or get into a fight period, because this is so going to apply to every single confrontation you have in your life, but one of the worst things you can do is walk out in the middle of it. No matter how mad you get, do not leave. There was one time, and it's been since we started this church, that my wife and I got into it, and I got upset, and I got in my car and drove off. And my kids, literally, this is the one time that my kids, while I was gone and just blowing off steam, just driving around, while I was gone, looked at my wife and said, "Are you guys going to get a divorce?" It'll throw your relationship with your wife and your family into chaos if you walk out in the middle, man. That's not a way to deal with fighting. It continues, and she says this, "I called to him, but there was no reply." Once again, we see the silent treatment. She's texting him, and he's not replying. She's trying to call him, and he's not picking up the phone. He's that upset that he is giving her the silent treatment. Once again, men, do not give your wife the silent treatment. She deserves better than that. I'm guilty of it. Every man in here is guilty of it. We get quiet. We don't want to talk. I get it, but that's not the way to deal with it. Verse 7, "The night watchman found me. As they made their rounds, they beat and bruised me and stripped off my veil. Those watchmen on the walls." What she means here is not that someone literally beat her up. What she's saying is she's devastated. This is probably the first big blowout they've ever had as a couple, and she feels like she has been beaten and bruised and stripped. She is devastated because the Shulamite thought to herself, "Man, he would never do this to me. We will never get into it like this. He'll never let me down like this." Number 2, major cause of fighting. Again, in no particular order. Listen to me when I say this. One of the biggest causes of fighting inside the context of marriage that I have seen is unrealistic expectations. Solomon goes into this relationship, and we see in the first several chapters, the first 2 weeks of this book, it's all lovey-dovey, it's all googly eyes, they got passion for each other. Man, he's like, "Man, I got this hot wife that I'm going to marry, and we get to consummate the marriage, and it's awesome." And now he's reached a point where he's thinking to himself, "Why is she always nagging me? Man, what happened to my irresistibly hot wife? Now she's more like a fussy mom. I got into this marriage thinking that it was going to be awesome and I could have sex when I wanted to, and I'd come home to her dressed in lingerie every single night and we'd watch football together, and now that's not happening." Shulamite is probably thinking the same thing. "I've been with guys that treat me bad before and let me down. Surely he's going to be different. He is different. We are in love. Oh, I'm gonna marry this guy, and here's the picture in my mind. All we're gonna do is sit around and pray together, and we're gonna share our feelings, and we're gonna be sensitive, and he's gonna cry with me, and he's gonna hold me, and here she is all alone. He's chosen work over her again. He leaves in the middle of the fight, and these unrealistic expectations do not get met." I'm going to make a statement that is very obvious, and we're going to unpack it more at the end when my wife comes up. But men and women, we know they're different on the outside, but we are completely different the way our brains are wired, the way we think, and on the inside. And that is not a bad thing. It is a good thing. Our culture has tried to tell us that we're the same, that girls can be boys and boys can be girls. And I was having a conversation with my daughter the other day about a female. There was a show where a female was playing contact sports, and I was just telling her realistically, the way a woman's body is structured, that probably will never work. And like, boy, what a blasphemous statement in our culture today, but it just is what it is. And instead of celebrating the differences, we're trying to bridge the gap in our culture between them, and it's confusing every single one of us. Women think guys should act like women and think like women, and guys think that they're going to marry a buddy that's going to be there and act like a dude all the time, and it's not true. Be careful with unrealistic expectations. She says this, though, in verse 8, and I want you to see, I love this part of the Bible because I believe that in the Song of Songs here, we're getting ready to see some clear warnings and some things that we shouldn't do. some avenues we shouldn't take. As they're fighting, you're seeing them learn how to fight and get along in their marriage. And watch what she does. She says this in verse 8, make this promise, O women of Jerusalem. Who's she talking to here? She's talking to her friends. Make this promise, O women of Jerusalem. If you find my lover, tell him I am weak with love. She goes to her friends to talk to them about the fight that she just had with her husband. And watch what the women say back. Verse 9. Keep in mind, these are the friends that were all for this marriage. Man, when they were engaged on the wedding day, they were so excited. They were supportive. Watch what her friends say. Why is your lover better than all others? O woman of rare beauty, what makes your lover so special that we must promise this? Translation, he doesn't deserve you. You could get so many guys that'll treat you better than he treats you. They're upset for her. You are a catch, and he's not treating you right. The same friends that encouraged and supported this union have now been stirred up as a result of her decision to go talk to them, and they've turned on this union. You see how practical this is? How many times does this play out? Number 3, again, in no particular order, major cause of fighting, especially inside the context of relationships and especially inside the context of marriage, is outside influences. Outside influences. Listen, the Bible says that you are to leave your father and mother and become one with your husband or your wife for a reason. I have seen people inside their marriage go to so-called sounding boards and trying to just get counsel, but really what they're doing is they're taking issues that should be between them and their spouse to an outside influence. And if that outside influence loves you, guess what's going to happen when you go to them and you say, he's being so mean to me, or she's being crazy, and you go to a friend, you go to a family member and you say that? They're going to get angry. And their protection instincts are going to kick in just like her friends. And when you go home and make up with your spouse, guess what? They don't get to see that and be a part of that. They're still angry, and they start to form opinions on your spouse, which will come out later as they say things just like her friends are saying. He's not good enough. You should leave. And in many instances in the middle of a fight, the last thing you need to hear is this kind of counsel. You got to be careful with outside influences. That even extends to, hear me when I say this, your exes that you've added on Facebook. I can't tell you how many times that I've seen people be tempted because of past relationships that they romanticize. It could be 20 years later and they add a girlfriend they had in high school on Facebook and start talking to them, and then there is all of a sudden this temptation to reach out and possibly have an adulterous affair. Listen, you have got to learn how to fight. You have got to learn how to fight. If you do not learn how to fight, then your marriage will never make it, and you will never have any lasting friendships that are not toxic. If your mom, if you grew up like this, if your mom chewed your coach out because you didn't get enough playing time on the field or on the court, then you probably have grown up in a way where you haven't learned how to fight your own battles. If your parents were the kind of parents that finished your science project for you the night before so you wouldn't fail your science class and have to deal with those consequences, then probably you've never learned how to stand up for yourself and fight your own battles. You've got to learn how to fight with your spouse. In fact, I heard one speaker, I don't think he was a pastor, but a speaker said that you've got to be good at fighting to be married. You have to be good at fighting to be married, because if you never fight, there is trouble in paradise. Well, here this couple is learning how to have confrontation with each other. Let me give you 5 tips on how to have confrontation. This applies to your marriage, and this will apply really to any confrontation that you have in your life. And I believe that this is completely biblical. I don't have time to go through all the scriptures to back this up, but I'm sure you won't disagree with these 5 things if you have any kind of sort of foreknowledge of the Bible. Number 1, you keep it in the now. What I mean by that is you don't bring up the past. You don't bring up stuff that happened 5 years ago or stuff that's been happening. You deal with the issue at hand. You identify it quickly and you don't sit on it. You deal with it as fast as you can. Number 2, you stop and listen. I simply mean by you stop and what I mean by that simply is you don't interrupt. You remember you got two ears and one mouth for a reason. Hey, I know you got a good point. I know that you think you're right, but you got to stop. Everything in you could be wanting to interrupt your spouse as they're telling you how they feel, what you did, and how it made them feel, and you could be wanting to defend yourself, but you be quiet and bite your tongue. Let them say their piece. Number 3, fight clean. Fight clean, y'all. Come on, we're all guilty of this. What I mean by that is don't exaggerate. Don't use words like never or always. You never do this or you always do this, because that most likely is not true. That's just the emotion coming out in the moment. Don't use cuss words at each other. Don't call each other names. Fight clean. Don't attack each other's character. Well, don't make assumptions and attack someone's character and assume that you know why they did that thing. Don't do that. Be very, very careful. Number 4, realize you're on the same team. In other words, don't try to win against them. You're playing for the same team. You two win together. So don't always try to come out and think that you're right about everything. Really simple question. Are you always right about everything? If you think you're right about everything, you're a narcissist. And you might be psychotic. I'm wrong more often than I'm right about anything in my life, much less when I get into a confrontation with my spouse. And the same is probably going to be true with you. Listen, you're on the same team. And then number 5, simply forgive and forget. Forgive and forget. And this cycle will continue because once you forgive and forget, you're going to keep it in the now. And you're not going to bring up things that have happened in the past because you've already forgiven and you've already forgotten about those things. We want to be like Jesus in this. He separates our sin as far as the east is from the west. He doesn't remember them anymore. Now, there could be some deeper issues. So if there's like habitual sin that takes place and there's things that are happening over and over, then you need to get with our counseling team and they'll walk you through some ways that they can help you out and different things like that. But all in all, this applies to almost every single confrontation that you are going to have. If you got to address something that's more serious, they keep doing it over and over, I get that. I'm not saying just let that go, but there are circumstances where that needs to take place. But when you fight, these 5 principles are biblical and they need to take place. Well, she's went to her friends. She's got them stirred up. And I want you to notice the difference in her tone as she's speaking to her friends right here. It's almost like the Shulamite realizes, uh-oh, I did something wrong. I should not have went to my friends and told them about this because now they're upset. And watch what she does as her tone about her husband changes when she says, my lover is dark and dazzling, better than 10,000 others. His head is finest gold, his wavy hair is black as a raven, his eyes sparkle like doves beside the spring water. They are set like jewels, washed in milk. His cheeks are like gardens of spices, giving off fragrance. His lips are like lilies, perfumed with myrrh. His arms are like rounded bars of gold set with beryl. His body is like bright ivory glowing with lapis lazuli. His legs are like marble pillars set in sockets of finest gold. His posture is stately, like the noble cedars of Lebanon. His mouth is sweetness itself. He is desirable in every way. Such, O women of Jerusalem, is my lover and my friend. What she's speaking to is several attributes that Solomon has that she loves. And what she's saying to her friends is, oh, my husband is awesome. He absolutely deserves me. No, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, y'all. We're just having a little tiff here, but he is awesome. He's high character. He's an awesome guy. I love him to death. I'm committed to him. You hear several things we've talked about the last couple of weeks, talked about Dove. We're committed to each other. I only have eyes for him, and here's the lesson. Only speak well of your spouse to everyone. You are your spouse's biggest fan to everyone. Listen to me. Even when you're in a fight, even when you leave the house one morning and you're not on the same page and you've got into it about something and you got to go work all day, you don't go to work and start trashing your spouse. I don't care who it is. You are their biggest fan. Men, you never go to someone and say, she's lost her mind. Ladies, you never go to someone and say, he's so stubborn. Hey, listen, maybe she did lose her mind. Maybe he is stubborn. That may be true, but it doesn't mean you should say it. Let me quote a line from our gossip sermon that we did several years ago. Everything you say should be true, but not everything that's true should be said. Ladies, I want to read to you something that was in the book, What Your Husband Really Wants. They say that men need 4 things. Ladies need to be his cheerleader, his champion, his companion, and his complement. They would state that a man thrives on his wife's approval, praise, respect, and encouragement. And we see her being her husband's biggest fan here, even though they're into it. Well, her friends chirp back to her and they say this, "Where is your lover gone, O woman of rare beauty? Which way did he turn so we can help you find him?" Okay, you got us back on board with the relationship is what they're saying. We see you love him. We see he hasn't done anything real bad to you. You've got us convinced. You've talked real well of him. We think he's a good man that loves you, and we want this to continue. So just tell us how we can help. These are godly friends again. And she speaks back and says, "My lover has gone down to his garden, to his spice beds, to browse in the gardens and gather the lilies." And then she says this. Listen to this. This is huge. "I am my lover's, and my lover is mine." She's starting to get perspective on the situation. I'm his, he's mine. We just had a fight. This is just a bump in the road. We're going to be okay. She says he browses among the lilies. Notice the perspective she gets. And it's the perspective we need to have when we fight inside the context of our marriage. She realizes he's not going to leave me. This isn't over. We're not going to give up on this thing. In other words, here's a big point for you. Divorce is not an option. You should never threaten with divorce. You should never threaten leaving. I don't believe, unless there's some kind of circumstances where someone has addictions or different things like that they got to go to rehab. There may be some others, but separating, no, it's not an option. Quitting and giving up is not an option. Giving up on each other is not an option. See, when your foundation is Christ, you should have no fear of abandonment. Remember last week, middle of the consummation of the marriage, he says, "You're my sister first. God's our Father, then you're my bride." Our foundation is God. Our foundation is Christ first and foremost, not lust, not our attraction towards each other. Well, you should have no fear of abandonment. Jesus will never leave us. Romans chapter 8 makes it clear that he will never leave or forsake us no matter what we do, no matter what happens in our life, and you should have the same commitment to your marriage. In fact, perfect love casts out any fear. See, here's what happens in our culture, y'all, and I just want to point this out. It's been proven in study after study, and no matter who you talk to, that typically inside most marriages, the hardest years are the first 1 to 3 years, because you have to do what the Shulamite and Solomon are doing right here. You have to figure out how to fight. You got to figure out how to live together. You got to learn each other's personalities. Like, you think you know each other, but then you get married, you're committed to each other, you do it before God, and you're working things out. You're working selfishness out of your life. You're learning how to love each other agape selflessly. And the hardest years are typically the first 1 to 3 years. And then most studies show that after around year 3, things start to get really, really good. And the longer you're married, the better they get. Well, in our culture, the overwhelming majority of divorces take place, guess what? before 3 years. And I watch people marry someone, get divorced a year later, get in a relationship and get married a year later. They're married for 2 years. They get divorced. You're torturing yourself. You're going through the worst years over and not bad, but in the context of a whole marriage relationship, years 1 through 3 are the hard. You're doing the hardest years over and over and over. How about looking at each other and saying, we're not going to give up. We're not going to. My lover is mine, and I'm yours. We aren't going to give up on each other. We're in this to the end. Well, Solomon's getting ready to jump back in, and he's getting ready to talk about his bride. And you know they're made up because Solomon is getting ready to use the same language he used on their wedding night. So notice that after they get through this fight, it's almost like they go right back to the passion and the love that they had for each other. He goes right back to being verbally affirming to each other. Listen to what he says. There's a few things that he says different, but you'll notice some of these similarities. Verse 4, Solomon says, "You are beautiful, my darling, like the lovely city of Tirzah. Yes, as beautiful as Jerusalem, as majestic as an army with billowing banners. Turn your eyes away, for they overpower me. Your hair falls in waves, like a flock of goats winding down the slopes of Gilead." We've heard that before, right? "Your teeth are as white as sheep that are freshly washed. Your smile is flawless, each tooth matched with its twin. Your cheeks are like rosy pomegranates behind your veil." Now, he doesn't get into some of the other, like when we talked about the baby deer and different things like that he talked about on the wedding night, the fountain and stuff like that. And it's clear that, they're most likely not, fully unclothed with each other. They're just making up. But he says, "Your cheeks are like rosy pomegranates behind your veil. Even among 60 queens and 80 concubines and countless young women, I would still choose my dove." There's that dove again. I only got eyes for you, my perfect one. In other words, what Solomon's saying is, I will never leave you ever. I don't care who showed up. Even while we're fighting, if somebody tried to get with me, I would choose you any day. I'd love to live with you the rest of my life fighting than live with anyone else not fighting. He says, "I would still choose my dove, my perfect one, the favorite of her mother, dearly loved by the one who bore her. The young women see her and praise her. Even queens and royal concubines sing her praises. Who is this, arising like the dawn, as fair as the moon, as bright as the sun, as majestic as an army with billowing banners?" Men, I just want to tell you this real quick. After you get done fighting with your wife, it's very clear that Solomon is being verbally affirming. So when you get done fighting is when she needs affirmation big time. Especially after a fight. You got to tell her, "I love you. I'm so sorry I got upset. You know you're the only one for me. I would never leave you. You're beautiful. You're pretty. You're better than all the other anybody else. Even if we fight, I love you the most." They need that more than ever after you fight. Now, he needs something else. Watch what she says, ladies. She speaks up and says, "I went down to the grove of walnut trees and out to the valley to see the new spring growth, to see whether the grapevines had budded or the pomegranates were in bloom. Before I realized it, my strong desires had taken me to the chariot of a noble man." In other words, what she's saying is, we are getting ready to make up, and it's going to be awesome. The greatest thing about fighting in the context of a godly marriage, in my opinion, the greatest part of it is getting to make up. Next week, we're going to pick up from here, and that's when we're going to talk about the Christian bedroom, because she's getting ready to make up with him, and it's going to be hot and heavy. But ladies, I want you to notice, after a fight, you need affirmation, especially verbally, more, like really pour it on, guys. But what he needs is affection. She's getting ready to be very liberal with the affections that she is going to give him. After a fight, ladies, make sure you are affectionate with him, because he is going to need that, and he is going to love that. Well, this is the point where, once again, I'm going to invite my bride up, and she is going to give us and help give us a woman's perspective on everything that we talked about today. I told you guys at the beginning of this series that I didn't want to do a disservice by just having a guy up here talking about, ladies, you need to do this, and men, you need to do this. And so bringing her up, I couldn't think of anybody more godly with more wisdom than her to come up and talk to us about what we've talked about today. Hey, we need to switch sides because, yeah, look, our T-shirts, nothing makes sense. Get out there. Oh. Show everybody. Nothing makes sense when we are apart. So you got to stand on that side. Is that going to be weird?
These T-shirts were actually his idea, and it's kind of surprised me that he wanted to wear them, but I just think it's really sweet.
Yep.
So.
Yep, it is.
I just love the Bible because it's so real. She locked him out of the bedroom, and I just think that's just so real. And we're going to talk about fighting, and I feel like a lot of times why we fight is because we have these unrealistic expectations. And I love that you said, she was probably thinking he's going to come home early, we're going to eat pizza, we're going to watch TV, we're going to hang out, we're going to have a good night. And she waited and waited, and she was probably really upset. And he came to the door, and he's like, why won't you let me in? He's thinking I love that you said he thought he had no clue.
No clue.
Like, because she never communicated. So I think a lot of times why we fight.
Like, let me interject this. Like, when you're married, this has been one of the things with us, and maybe some guys and gals in here could totally relate to this. When you ask your wife what's wrong, and she says, nothing, there's a good chance that it really is not nothing. But when you ask a guy what's wrong, majority of the time, sometimes not, but majority of the time, if he says nothing,
there's really nothing wrong.
Literally nothing. And so, like, Solomon's probably just like, what? What is she mad about? What in the world's going on? Why didn't she mention this before?
And so she pushed him to the point of leaving. Like, he just left. I mean, he shouldn't have done that.
He shouldn't have, yeah.
Right.
He should have been more thoughtful of her.
They should have communicated, and that's what it all boils down to.
And the only way to get better at marriage is to have these blow-ups, is to have these fights.
You have to
because
fight.
he didn't realize, maybe I should have texted her and told her, hey, I'm going to be working late tonight. I'll be at the office. If you need anything, let me know as soon as I get home. You want me to pick up something to eat for you on the way home? Yada, yada. Get a card, roses, whatever. But he didn't do that.
And then she could have made plan B, and things probably would have been fine. But what messes us up is our picture in our head. We have these unrealistic expectations, and we just think this is how a marriage is supposed to look. I mean, I thought marriage was going to be, every day he would go to work and we would come home and I would have dinner ready and the table would be set and we would sit down and have this beautiful dinner. And, life is crazy and it just doesn't go that way. But we have these expectations that just totally mess us up. And where do we get them? We get them from TV, from movies, and we get them, I think, too, from being infatuated with each other. And we
bad
think,
influences.
No,
bad influences too, and being infatuated. But yeah, go ahead.
But being infatuated with each other and thinking, like, you're on your best behavior at first.
Like,
so
ladies are like, he's so smart.
It doesn't bother me that he does that. That's not a big deal right now.
He just hasn't done
it's
anything
not a big
stupid
deal.
yet to let you down. Guys are like, man, dude, you don't understand. She's so hot. Like, she's always looks good.
You can ignore
she
everything.
Never uses the bathroom.
Because of the infatuation.
Like, never seen that. Like, it's just awesome. And just wait. Okay, so those expectations.
Think you have to expect conflict.
Yep.
That's the biblical expectation is to expect conflict, expect hard times. And so we have to change our expectation to a biblical marriage. And I think Song of Solomon shows us that couples fight.
That's right.
And that there's a right way and a wrong way to handle that. And I think a lot of times, like the Shulamite woman, she locked him out. And I feel like we revert. That's our first instinct, is to revert to a childish kind of attitude. I mean, that's what my kids do when they're mad at each other. They lock each other out of the room, or, they fight, or they start trash talking. That's sometimes, that's your first instinct. You name call, you get emotional, you get defensive.
It's really hard for us not to laugh right now because we're preaching to ourselves right now. Like, that's why we're looking at each other and just smiling, because it's like, yeah, we've done that before. We probably did that this week. May have done that today. You never know, right? So yeah.
So be careful reverting to your childish instincts, and also be careful reverting to what you've seen in the past. I feel like a lot of us, if our parents were divorced
Bad
or
example.
maybe we never had a good example of marriage, sometimes we revert to the fights that we saw when we were younger.
Yeah.
And maybe all we saw was yelling and screaming and throwing things and, dad walking out and people just saying things just to hurt each other. Maybe they're not true. You're just trying to hurt
Trying
each
to
other.
win, trying to win. I'm trying to
Yes.
one up 'em.
Not
I'm
being
trying to
on the
win.
same side.
I've got a scoreboard, and it's me. I'm at 10, and they're at 8, and I'm going to keep my lead. Yeah.
And that happens
do
to
that.
be like what, when we first got married, that's kind of what I reverted to because my parents were divorced. And so I saw a lot of, fights and yelling and things. And so that's how I kind of thought we were supposed to fight. Or maybe I know some women too that what they revert to is they just shut down.
right.
Like they don't say a word. They never tell how they feel. They just kind of get quieter and quieter. So maybe that's you. Maybe you can't relate to the fellowship that the
Yeah,
neighbors can hear.
And if you've been divorced and you have kids, just keep in mind, y'all, like, listen, this is very important. That's a really powerful thing that you just said. Those kids' mom or dad may be your ex, but it's not their ex-parent. And how you treat them, like, listen to me, how you treat your ex is going to define so many things for your kids. Okay, you're divorced, it's over, we get it. But the way you talk about them, the way you talk to them, the way you talk down about them, those different things, the decisions you make today are going to affect your kids, not only your future, but your kids' future. And so be real careful. Because
That's their mom.
Yeah.
That's their dad.
Man.
Like, let's not trash talk. Let's not speak death into that relationship.
Even if they're talking death about you, I promise you there will come a day when your kids get older and they come to you and say, thank you so much for never talking about them like they did you. Thank you so much for you were the example, basically.
I was going to talk about how the scripture that says life and death are in the power of the tongue. And so, like, I want to speak life to him. I mean, in an argument, I think it's so easy to forget that and just say hurtful things, and you don't mean them. You're just trying to communicate how upset you are, and by that, you can really damage your relationship. And, there can be things, there's things you said that I've said years ago that, I still feel bad that I said them, and maybe that's vice versa, too.
It is vice versa. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When I walked out that one time I told y'all about, when we did this series, I told her, I'm so sorry I did it. I told her I was sorry when I did it, but I think about it now and I'm just like, man, I should have never done that. What was I thinking? I just got mad, got emotional, and ran out and, thinking about my kids, looking at her going, are y'all done? And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? Are we done? I just walked out in the middle of a fight. It wasn't a big deal to me, but it was to them.
Especially if their love language is words of affirmation and you're like constantly in the heat of the fight, saying you're worthless and you this and that, like that can really damage and just put space in between your relationship. That's really hard to come back together. So what is the right way to fight? You've already gone over some things, and I wrote down just a few things. I think first, decide if it's a fight that you need to have. Were you just tired? Were you just grumpy? Were you just hangry, which is a lot of times my problem. I'm just haven't eaten all day, and I'm just really hungry. Or were you just venting or processing something that was going on? But if it is, so sometimes you need to go back to them and be like, I'm sorry that I was so upset about that. That wasn't you. That was me. That was my problem. And I think a lot of times we just go off because it's something, and we just take it out on our spouse.
And that's why I said it's real important to listen to, because sometimes we fought because she'll be wanting to talk through something, because remember, women are verbal, and so they want to talk. Men like to think through their emotions. So you see this play out in the Song of Songs. Like when they get upset, they get quiet. He's giving her a silent treatment. He goes away on his own. We want to be alone so we can figure it out. Women want to talk through it. And so sometimes, guys, you just got to be quiet because you're a fixer. You don't want to see her upset. You want to fix the problem at hand. And so there's been times where she's been talking to me about something, and I just need to listen and don't need to say, well, have you thought about doing this? Or why don't we do this? Or I'll fix it, we'll do this. man, it'll lead to conflict every time. 2 ears, 1 mouth, for a reason. Listen, listen, listen.
And he'll ask me,
Men are fixers.
is this a problem that we need to fix, or are you just needing me to listen right now? That is so helpful when you say that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I realize, I just need to talk through process. So if there's a conflict that does need to happen, I want to say first, breathe and calm down and decide if right then is the time that conflict needs to happen. Are you at the grocery store? It's probably not a good idea to have that conflict. Are you in front of your kids? Probably not a good idea to have that conflict. Are you too upset in that moment? Maybe you do need a second to just calm down, or a day, or maybe you need to talk about it tomorrow. So think of a time to talk when you've both had a chance to think logically and there's less emotion. And let me just say this too, not during the football game. Like, that is the worst time when he's watching. For him, it's not football, it's wrestling. But that is like the worst time to go and be like, hey, I need to talk to you. So think of them.
Right before I preach.
Oh, goodness.
Brooks never come to me right before I preach. And y'all don't ever do that to me either. It drives me crazy. I got to talk to you, Pastor. I know you're getting ready to preach in 3 minutes, but I'm I'm mad about something, or I can't believe you said, wait, and she's learned that too.
Just set an appointment for later.
Timing is important.
And not right when he walks in the door, because, I'm just going to bombard him. And then maybe just say, hey, I need to talk to you. When's a good time to talk? And usually when I say that, you say,
what's the problem?
Never. You're like, no, we're not talking. No, forget it.
I
Usually just say, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah, I guess I do when you're like, hey, I need to talk to you about something. And I'm like, no.
So when you finally do talk.
Talking.
Yeah. When you
I
finally.
don't want to talk about it.
Stop. When you do talk, listen to each other. Like, let them finish their sentence. I feel like a lot of times in the past, and sometimes still, when we fight, I'm like, just let me get my sentence out. You tend to interrupt. You're just so hurt, and you just want to say what you want to say. But it's not just about you. It's about the relationship. It's not just fixing my problem. It's fixing us. It's fixing our problem. So, and dig in deeper too to see if there's a deeper issue. Yes, I flew off the handle because you threw your socks in the floor, but really that's not the issue. The issue is this is the 100th time that I've done that. And I just blew up because I'm so tired of doing it, and I never really brought it up before. And you didn't know how bad the socks on the floor were upsetting me until now. Yeah. So make sure there's not like a deeper issue.
For the men, secret sin can be a deeper issue. And so you just need to, you got to talk to your wife about your shortcomings. You're trying to be Superman to her, and you start having conflict, but you've got an addiction to pornography. Or, you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing. That's just a great example, because there's so many men that struggle with that, and their wives either have no clue, or they've caught them a few times, but they don't know how deep-seated it is. And boy, you talk about, it'll just create conflict and conflict and conflict. So the deep-seated issue is a real thing. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, just let each other talk.
You got to talk about it. You got to confess.
Communicate.
You got to confess. You got to repent. You got to just be real,
You've got to say those words, I was wrong.
Yeah.
That's the hard thing to say. But don't feel like, too, I think in that moment, that the problem has to be settled right then. It's okay to simmer and to think and to come back to it later and just try to get on the same page. I think that's the biggest thing. Just communicate and try to be on the same page.
That's right.
When you're fighting.
That's right.
That's all I've got.
That's good. That's all you got? Okay. Well, let's pray, guys. Lord, thank you so much for today. I thank you once again for the Song of Songs. Thank you for today. So applicational. This one today, I really believe can help every single person, even if they never plan on getting married or having a dating relationship or whatever. God, help us to glorify you in how we have confrontations. Help us to glorify you in our marriages. I pray for every single marriage under the sound of my voice that they never give up. I pray for healing, God, and I pray for more strength than ever before as a result of us learning from your word. You are awesome and you are mighty. In Jesus' name. Everybody said? Amen. Love you guys. Thank you so much for joining us online. We can't wait to see some of you guys soon as you get your vaccinations and come on in. Love y'all. See ya.